Hey folks, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. Let's discuss the Ascendant today. And the Ascendant is something that we talk about pretty often every day in astrology, but it's still something that is challenging to capture. The Ascendant is something that is a bit elusive. Every time you think you pin down the Ascendant, a piece of it kind of escapes through your fingers. So today we're gonna try to see if we can pin down the Ascendant some more, or kind of develop or outline a strong framework or an approach to the Ascendant that makes sense. And just for clarity's sake, when we say the Ascendant, we're being precise. We're saying like 16 degrees of Taurus. And when we speak about the rising sign, we're just talking about the sign. So the rising sign would be Taurus, but the Ascendant would be 16 degrees of Taurus. So just clearing that up before we begin. So the Ascendant has been described in astrology as the image of the personality. I forget now at this point which astrologer may have coined that term, the image of the personality, but it's this quality that someone perceives when they are meeting you for the first time, and it's the quality and the way of being that you in turn project when you are meeting someone for the first time. So you are giving off this energy. It's kind of, in an interesting way, a kind of a part of your aura that's transmitted. So there is a very real way in which the Ascendant is projected, but not because it's projected by the personality means that it is superficial. And this often trips up astrology students because they don't fully appreciate that, notwithstanding that the Ascendant is projected, it's still very central to the execution of someone's personality. Not because the Ascendant is an image means that it is superficial or sort of peripheral or extraneous to someone's personality or to their character. So, what happens is that students sort of know that the Ascendant is important in astrology. They kind of know that, but it's not really integrated into how they really understand the person and their chart. So the phrases that for me come closest to capturing what the Ascendant is: someone's way of being in the world, their active modus operandi, their active MO, their active way of being. And the word active is important, and we have a central clue as to why. The Ascendant is the Aries angle of the chart. It corresponds archetypally to Aries. So it's energized and actively perpetuating itself. That zone of the chart where the Ascendant is, that Aries angle, is active and energized and quite a dynamic point. So whatever the sign on the Ascendant is, we are actively expressing these qualities as a kind of immediate means of self-expression. The other phrases that for me come close to capturing what the Ascendant is: someone's approach to life, someone's active approach to life, or the active execution of the personality in the world, active self-expression in the world. These phrases for me capture the dynamism of the Ascendant, but also the importance of the Ascendant. So the Ascendant is something that is absolutely subconsciously projected. 95% of the time we are unaware of the Ascendant. We don't really know we're doing our Ascendant. We don't really have full consciousness of how we are doing our Ascendant. And other people see it a lot more clearly and a lot more obviously than we do. And that's why we encounter other people symbolically through the Descendant and the 7th house, who act as reflective mirrors for us. And we learn about how we are being our Ascendant from other people. So it's like we can't really see the backs of our heads without using a mirror. It's that kind of thing. So yes, it's true that the Ascendant is an image, the image of the personality. And when we get to know someone beyond that image, we get to know them through their moon. We have a saying in Jamaica that goes, see me and come live with me. Two different things. And it's really saying, to see me out there in the world is very different, a very different cup of tea than living with me. To see someone out there in the world that's through their ascendant, that's very different from living with them in an intimate way and really understanding more of who they are. So when we get to know someone really well, we get more insight into their core emotional needs and their basic feelings, yes? So we get more insight into their baseline mood and habits, and that's definitely usually achieved by living with them. So the moon, the astrological moon, captures all of that really, really nicely. This business of understanding someone in an intimate way through their core needs and feelings, and also a domestic situation, bringing that out. So the moon definitely gives us and captures that very nicely. So let's talk about how we can approach the ascendant in interpretation. We want to understand the element of the ascendant and how that stacks up with the other elements of the chart and the other core features of the chart. And we do this because we want to understand, well, what kind of gate to the person's character is the rising sign, is the ascendant? Does the gate tell us what is on the inside of the person's character, or is the gate totally different from what's on the inside? Do we have this really, let's say, opulent marble gate on the outside, but then this kind of quaint wooden cottage on the inside? So the ascendant has to do the work of translating someone's core inner wiring into the outer world. So how good is the ascendant as a kind of translator? What kind of translator is it? So let's say we have someone with a Scorpio sun in the 4th house and the moon in the 8th house and a Leo ascendant. So Scorpio sun in the 4th, sun in a water sign in a water house, and moon in the 8th. The moon is of course in a water house. So we have some key water signatures in that person's chart. But the ascendant is Leo, it's fire. So we could say that the fire ascendant, the Leo ascendant, may not immediately kind of cue us into how private and contained the person really is. That Leo ascendant is going to be personal and warm and affable, but that's not the whole story, because the person is much more private and contained. With Scorpio and the 8th house, Scorpio sun and 8th house moon, and the Scorpio sun in the 4th house, that person is much more emotionally sensitive and has much more depth of character and depth of feeling than the Leo ascendant may immediately present. So notwithstanding how warm the person is or how affable the person is, with so much water, the person is far more contained than they immediately present. But as we've said, the ascendant is not superficial. So that person in the example, notwithstanding the water emphasis, that person absolutely still needs to express the personal warmth of Leo as a way of actively executing their personality in the world. So it's not like they're putting on something. It's absolutely a way of being that is second nature to them, even though behind the scenes they're much more private and contained than we would immediately realize. Example 2, let's take water on the ascendant. Let's take a Cancer ascendant with an Aquarius moon. So that person, as a default mode of expression, is going to find it easy with Cancer rising to establish sympathetic rapport with other people. They're going to use their emotional intelligence as a way of operating in the world. But the Aquarian moon is much more impersonal. So they're actually more impersonal than they appear. So, by the way, I'm actually using real examples of people who I know, but not saying who they are. So in this instance, with Cancer rising, water rising, and Aquarius moon, the person I'm thinking of is actually a criminal attorney, defense attorney. So the Aquarius moon reflects how socially minded this person is, doing a lot of doing a lot of legal aid work for people who may not be able to afford the full cost of legal representation. So when you are a criminal defense attorney, the work can be quite emotionally demanding. You have to deal with people and their families. So the Cancer Ascendant gives the person I'm thinking of enough sympathetic rapport to navigate the emotional terrain of being a defense attorney. But his Aquarius moon allows him perhaps to stay sane because he is somewhat detached from it too. So let's use the opposite, air ascendant Aquarius and water sun Scorpio. So the air ascendant in Aquarius would probably conceal how deep and emotionally perceptive that Scorpio sun is. So we want to have a sense of how the ascendant is matching up with other key features of the chart. I'd like to mention that apart from the fact that we're not fully conscious of the ascendant, we may also not fully identify with our ascendant because we don't have the full story. So you could be, let's say, a Pisces rising, but if you have Mars trine your Pisces ascendant, that's going to modify the expression of your Pisces ascendant. So you probably might not feel a total resonance with the descriptions of Pisces rising. Yes? In approaching the ascendant, we consider two other things, the ruler of the ascendant and aspects to the ascendant. So if I have a Leo ascendant, let's say, where the sun is the ruler of that Leo ascendant, where the sun is by sign, will modify the expression of the ascendant. Yes? So to go back to the example of our attorney, that person has Cancer rising, so we look to where the moon is, and we said that the moon was in Aquarius. So the person is much more, as we said, emotionally detached than, say, if the moon were in Pisces. Yes? So the point is that the Cancer ascendant and the Aquarian moon, the ruler of that ascendant in Cancer, is one framework. So ascendant and ascendant ruler is kind of one matrix. In this example, there is this tone of Aquarian energy to that Cancer ascendant, and the energies are kind of blended in a sense. Of course, we want to note immediately the significant aspects to the ascendant. So in terms of just looking at the chart in front of you, what would be most obvious are conjunctions to the ascendant. So if Mars is on the ascendant, that person's Mars function is going to be quite obvious as an active mode of self-expression. So of course, with Mars on the ascendant, we have Mars on the archetypal Aries angle. So this would be quite active and dynamic because of that Mars Aries resonance. If moon is on the ascendant, then that person may have a very instinctive way of approaching life and navigating through the world. If a planet is on the ascendant, then for me, it goes up the ladder of importance. It goes up higher than the sign itself. So if the ascendant is Sag, yeah, and the moon is on the ascendant, I'm going to pay more attention to the significance of the moon on the ascendant, on the angle, rather than just the fact that it is Sag rising. We may have planets that are opposing the ascendant, which means that they are obviously on the descendant. So going back to what we said in the beginning about reflective mirrors, planets on the descendant, opposite the ascendant, are going to be reflected back to us in the context of relationships. So with planets on the descendant, we encounter those aspects of ourselves, those psychological faculties or functions in relationships with other people, and they're kind of activated in that context. So with planets on the descendant, we may also find that we want to contribute or give those aspects of our personality or character in relationships. So if we have Mercury on the descendant, we want to give our mercurial side in the context of a relationship. But I think it will be useful. I'm going to do a brief video just talking about the descendant alone. Yes? Let's talk about squares to the ascendant. Opening squares are going to have that Cancerian quality. So squares from the fourth house will tend to have that Cancerian kind of quality. The qualities of the planet squaring the ascendant from the fourth house side may be inhibited or suppressed. There could be some kind of fear of expressing that quality. So let's say Mars is squaring the ascendant from the fourth house side. There may be a challenge of actively expressing our Mars out of fear. We may kind of hold back our Mars, but the fact that Mars is in aspect to the ascendant is saying that Mars is actually a key part of that person's self-expression. Yes, so that person would need to learn to overcome fears or inhibitions and integrate Mars in a healthy way so that his or her self-expression and happiness does not suffer. Closing squares are going to have a Capricornian quality. So with squares from the 10th house side to the ascendant, there can be some sort of pressure to achieve, some need for recognition that is bound up with that planet, or being conscious of failure. So let's say, again, Mars square the ascendant from the 10th house side may represent this kind of built-in pressure to achieve and to act in the direction of that person's ambition. And that is quite central to that person's way of being in the world. It's getting darker now, so the light's changing on the outside there. I have lots of windows, so the video is going to be quite responsive to the light on the outside, but we're going to continue anyway. All right, so squares to the ascendant in general can also indicate a kind of problematic expression of the planet. So meaning that the planet's expression is not integrated very well into the personality as a whole. Either we're doing too much or too little of the planet. So if it's Mars, we can either be too aggressive or not assertive enough. So the ascendant is very immediate and very personal, and planets in aspect to the ascendant are recognized and recognizable by people in an immediate way as being a part of someone's energy field. Like, you kind of have a nose for it. You can sniff Mars in aspect to someone's ascendant. Yeah. So if you know someone very well, knowing the condition of their ascendant can be very valuable intel. Yeah. So you have a more objective sense of their preferred way of operating. So yes, when we do know someone closely, we know them through their moon, but the ascendant doesn't go away. It's a central part of that person's self-expression and way of operating. And so obviously it must come up in the context of a relationship. So let's go through a couple of examples of the ascendant as the way of being in the world, the way of operating in the world, the MO. So I've noticed in my personal life and client practice, for example, that Aries on the ascendant often means that the person wants to do what they want to do and to be left alone to do it. Aries rising. I've noticed that the person, as a way of operating, tends to resist their personal desires and agendas being thwarted by other people. Yes, the Aries ascendant person is not so willing to be inconvenienced or sacrifice their personal desires on account of someone else or other people. Aries ascendant people tend to be quite aware of what they want and less aware of others, from my personal observation through many years of looking at this thing. The person's way of operating as Aries rising can feel a bit abrupt or a bit abrasive, but what I've realized in my own personal life is that with Aries ascendant people and even Aries moon people, you may have to look past how they deliver something to you. How they say what they say can rub you the wrong way, but if you have enough patience to look past their delivery sometimes or not take it personally, it makes for much more harmonious relating. Let's do some more Cancer rising. Cancer rising people, in my observation, have a strong amount of emotional intelligence, and they use their emotional intelligence as currency, as a way of operating within the world and navigating the world. They're able to establish, like we've said, sympathetic rapport with people quite easily. But they are, on the other hand, they're sensitive to personal criticism. They don't take it quite well at all. Perhaps more than others, they are more sensitive to being criticized. And they can be quite moody, and there's this kind of fluctuating emotional state. You don't know what you're going to get with a Cancer rising in any given moment. They can alternate between being warm and then too sensitive and hurt. Leo ascendant, warm, outgoing, and actively encouraging other people in the direction of their highest potential. Leo rising is the cheerleader for other people, and my partner has Leo on the ascendant, and I've seen this very close up in operation. Leo ascendant, charismatic and generous self-expression. All right, Scorpio rising, ineffable, private, contained, somewhat aloof. Because Scorpio rising is so self-contained, they may not be good at establishing a rapport with other people immediately. Obviously, as we've said, it's all modified by the sign position of the ruler of the ascendant and aspects to the ascendant. So take all of this as kind of very general guidelines, general observations, okay? Sagittarius, in my observation, restlessness and a need for freedom. The whole way of being in the world is colored by not wanting to be tied down or held back from exploring. And with Sag rising as a way of being, when they satisfy their curiosity through exploring, Sag rising is going to move on to the next thing. All right. Capricorn ascendant can be, in my observation, status conscious, concerned with, or let's say conscious of the correct way of acting. What's the correct way of acting? The Capricorn rising person can be conscious of what other people think of their position in society. On the other hand, Capricorn rising, extremely high standards of personal excellence, sometimes too high, and that's just how they do their thing. Aquarius rising, headstrong, may not really let other people's opinions influence their choices. Yes. Aquarius rising does not want to be told what to do and will resist the imposition of others. They kind of needing to have a freedom of thought and of action. Aquarius rising may not always recognize how nonconformist they are, because for them it's a kind of personal norm. Aquarius rising is friendly, but in an impersonal kind of way, not the personal closeness of Cancer or the personal warmth of Leo. Opposite sign. Aquarius rising, independent and aloof and not reliant on other people's opinions. There's a kind of willfulness to Aquarius rising that may not be seen. In other words, the willfulness is kind of more internal. They're not saying, oh my God, forget you. And they're not always waving a flag for their position like maybe Aquarius sun. But Aquarius rising is going to do what they want to do and decide on that internally, but not always kind of wave a flag for it in a kind of overt and conspicuous way. All right, folks, that's it from me on the Ascendant. Definitely chime in with your own approaches and your own observations, and definitely do also check out all the other astro content on the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and Until next time, talk soon. Bye.